of this series, which will go for however many months it takes. It's usually somewhere between 8 and 9 months. But we are all, for those of us who are here, we are dwelling in the Sukkah, and so we say the following prayer. Please repeat after me. Baruch, Atah, Adonai, Eloheinu, Melech, Ha'olam, Asher, Kirishanu, B'mitzvotav, B'tzivanu, Lashev, Besukkah. Amen. It means, blessed are you, Lord God, rule of the universe, who sanctified us with your commandments, commanded us to dwell in the Sukkah. If this is your first time being in a Sukkah, then pull up a chair. Just pull up a chair. You can, some rooms over here. The cushiony ones are more comfy. For those for the first time, bless God for bringing us to this moment, to this time, and this place. Together we say, Amen. Before we were studying, there's a Hasidic custom that prior to studying, is this someone texting saying they can't get on? There's a Hasidic custom that we light a candle so that the angel of study blesses our study. So it's especially important.
And do we do the blessing for studying Torah?
We do, if I can get the candle. I think my oh, there we go.
And are there specifications of if the candle should be lit by a lighter or a match?
Yeah, the specification is whichever the rabbi has on hand.
Good answer.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kirishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah la'asok b'divrei Torah la'asok b'divrei Torah la'asok b'divrei Torah la'asok b'divrei Torah. And because this is the fourth night of Sukkot, we have ushpezin. So be seated, holy guests, be seated, guests of faithfulness, be seated, holy ones, be seated in the shade of the Holy One, blessed be he in his presence, the Shekhinah. Tonight we invite that Joseph should invite himself and all of the other guests, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Aaron, and David, to come and dwell in our Sukkah, to guide us in our learning and to be with us. Okay, so we call this Judaism 101. I teach it every year, and people often take it multiple times a year. And the idea is that by the time, if you go through the whole series, 8-9 months, you know more than most first and second year rabbinic students. Okay, so we're just going to go over a little brief outline, a few different things. There are some Bibles, different forms of the Bible on the table. These are also some other books that I would recommend for different purposes and different reasons, just to have in your library. This is an amazing book to have in your library. It's called The Jewish Way. It's written by Reform Rabbi Greenberg, but it's really a wonderful piece. It goes through the historical meaning and practices of each of the Jewish holidays. It's really a wonderful, wonderful book. I think I'm a big storytelling fan, so I think a book like this, Rabbi Nachman's Stories, or Treasury of Jewish Folklore, or Legends of the Baal Shem Tov, I think these are wonderful books. Everyone should have a copy of the Tanakh, the Bible. We'll talk about that in a moment, in their home, one sort or another. My favorite publisher is actually Art Scroll, Mussar Publishing, because I think the translation is the truest to all of it. And then there are other books here as well that you can look at and see that are good books to just start having in your home and collect. I think this is a great book. This is a book by my teacher and friend of 40 years of blessed memory, Rabbi Schwartzy, called I Love When That Happens. It's a series of different teachings from him. It's a wonderful piece. Anything by Shlomo Carlebach, Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach, these are Shlomo's stories. So these are all different books. So let's talk about some terms, because we need to start identifying terms. I can't teach with a watch on. So we need to start identifying terms so we have the same language. Okay? Some basic terms. The Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible. And we call them Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. That's not their names. Their names are Bereshit, Shmot, Vayikra, Bamidbar, and the Varim. But those books. The Nevi'im is the second section of the Hebrew Scriptures. This is the prophets. This is where you'll find Judges, where you'll find Jeremiah, where you'll find Ezekiel, these different prophetic books. It's called Nevi'im. And the third section are called Ketuvim, the writings section of the Bible. This is the poetry. This is Job and Psalms and Proverbs and those. I don't like the author at all, but I am a fan of this book. It's a commentary on Ketuvim. I'm not a fan of the author at all, but I do like the book a lot. I'll say you're right. But it's a commentary on Ketuvim. So we call that as an acronym. We're just find a lot of acronyms in Judaism. If you have a question, just chime it in. If you're on Facebook Live, just type in the question, and our beloved Orlando will tell me what it is at some point. Just toss it in. But you'll find a lot of acronyms. Okay, so Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchak would be called Rashi. Okay, Rabbi Moshe ben Moshe might be Rambam. Here you'll find Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim will be Tanakh. So we just put the vowels in. Okay, and so when we talk about the Hebrew Scriptures, we are talking about Tanakh. We never call the Hebrew Scriptures the Old Testament. That implies there's a New Testament. We don't accept there's a New Testament, okay? So we don't call it. And by the way, does anyone know what it's actually called? It's not called the New Testament. Does anyone know what the original title was? Brit Chadash, the New Covenant.
Oh, really?
Like Brit, like bris. Okay? It's called the New Covenant. We don't call the Old because we don't accept there's a New Covenant. So it doesn't make sense. All right? This is the basic text that we use. Again, I go very quickly, so you got to chime in if you have a question. Okay?
Linguistically, I'm just thinking about the difference between Testament and Covenant.
There's a difference.
There's a huge difference.
There's a huge difference.
linguistically.
Oh, there's a huge difference. So, all religions want you to act righteously and believe in God. Right? Well, let's take Catholicism, which is the basis of all Christianity, at its root. In Catholicism, if you can only believe in God or act righteously, the church says believe in God because the priest can forgive you. Right? In Judaism, if you can only do one, we believe in action. And in fact, the Yerushalmi Talmud actually teaches that God says better that you should act righteously with each other than believe in me, because your righteous actions will lead to a faith and a belief. We see that in Sukkot. You know, the more you dwell in a sukkah, the more you're feeling the spiritual uplifting. So, we are a place of action. And you see that in all of our rituals. Nowhere is that more clearly seen than in weddings and funerals. In a funeral, our tradition is you cover the mitzvah shel chesed gadol, the good deed of great compassion, is when you cover the entire casket with earth. It's not throwing dirt at them. It's tucking them in with the last blankets they will have in this world. It's action. As opposed to in many churches where they do their service and then they let somebody else go bury their loved ones. The other place you see it is in a Jewish wedding. Okay? I was very blessed yesterday. I did a wedding. Really, really sweet couple, very young. He was in his 80s and she was in her 70s. Okay, and when you put the ring on, you don't say, "Do you vow to promise to do?" We don't do that. What we do is we put it on. The groom puts it on the index finger of the bride, saying, "With this ring, you are consecrated to me according to the laws of Moses and Israel." And then, if she accepts it, she puts it on her ring finger, and vice versa. It's an action, not words. And that's really important to realize. We are action-based. It's, the old story that it's in the Talmud that there was a prospective convert, and he was going to all the different rabbis and saying, "I will convert to Judaism if you can teach me the entire Torah standing on one foot." And they all said, "Get out of there." Rabbi Hillel, stood on one foot. He said, "Don't do to anyone else what you don't want them doing to you. That is the entire Torah. The rest is commentary. Now, go and practice." It's action-based. Okay, so this is a really important piece to understanding Judaism. That's why, if you really want to understand Judaism, the two things to understand are our calendar and our prayer book. Because our calendar is all about action. This didn't just magically appear. I mean, it kind of did, but, the sukkah, right? It, as you can tell, it takes a lot of work, but we love it. So that is one of the big concepts in Judaism, is this concept of action versus faith. Another concept is the concept of a portable homeland. We are unique in human history. Best way to assimilate and destroy a culture is to take it off of its natural native homeland. That's why you have the Trail of Tears. That's why you have these things. But we survived. And we're going to study this in a number of weeks, but the reason we survived is our rabbis created a portable homeland. We became a people of the book, not a people of the building or a people of the land. We became a people of the book. So while Jerusalem is still holy for us, and the temple is still the temple, we can practice Judaism anywhere and everywhere. This is extremely important. So instead of the sacrifices that took place in the temple, we have prayer services that were reverse engineered to create the same psycho-emotional experience as going to see a sacrifice or being there when there's a sacrifice. That's what the services are built on. And it's all reverse engineered. So we created this portable homeland. We are very unique in that. That's why the Dalai Lama, when he was thrown out of Tibet, the first people he wanted to talk to were rabbis. Because he wanted to say, how'd you do it? And one of the ways we did it was through our prayer service, our language, etc. Okay? Again, I'm moving very quickly, so if you have a question, you got to chime in. There's a skeleton key that we will go over repeatedly in different ways. It opens all of Judaism when you understand it. It's God's sacred name. So God's name is Yud, He, Vav, and He. Now, you look on your handout, which is also, I believe, on Facebook to be downloaded for anyone who needs. God's sacred name looks like this. It's this page. Yud, He, Vav, and He. Now understand that in Hebrew, the way that we read Hebrew is the vowels are below the letters. So, first of all, Hebrew goes from right to left. It's not backwards. That's how Hebrew goes. And the vowels go underneath. So, in the Torah, there's no vowels. But if you know what something says, then you know what it says. If I said, please take a look at one of the BKS over here, you'd know that was books. If I said, hi, STPHN, we'd know we're talking to Stephen. Right? This name is often called either YHWH for Yud, He, Vav, and He. Ancient Hebrew, Vav was pronounced Wa. Adonai, which means my master. Hashem, which means the name. Ha means the, Shem means name. Or academics call it the Tetragrammaton because they like to sound important. Okay? But it's the Yud, He, Vav, and He. Now these are four soft letters. Why do we not just pronounce it for the name that it is? The reason is because we're not sure. Each of these letters, the Yud could be pronounced silent, Ya, or Ja. The He could be silent or Ha. The Vav could be Va, Wa, O, or U. And the He could be silent or He. We don't want to insult anyone. You wouldn't like it if I came up to you and I said, hey, Astefan, or hey, Astufanina, right? Because I just looked at the consonants. Or if I said, so Andrew, we could just as easily, could be, no, Droa, how are you? So we don't want to offend God. So we're not sure how to pronounce it. And moreover, we don't know the vowels. So we don't know, maybe it's Yuhu Wuhu, or Yahawaha, or whatever it may be. Yehuihi, right? Or that's where you get Jehovah or Yahweh, things like that. So that's why we call it Adonai, meaning my master, or we call it Hashem, meaning the name. Everyone with me so far? Okay? Just some basic concepts as we start going in. Now, I just want to show you how things start. The goal is to have people to start to think like rabbis. Not like rabbis today, but like ancient rabbis. Jewish thinking is not linear. It's non-linear. It's not rational. It is not irrational. You're loving this, aren't you? It's non-rational. Okay? It's non-rational. It is the way our minds actually think. Our minds don't think linearly. They think circuitously. And that's how Judaism is. And so, when we study, we need to look at different levels. Now, in Hebrew, just like in other languages, the letters have numerical values. We call that gematria. So, how many remember your Roman numerals? Right? An I was 1, a V was 5. What's this? It's a Roman soldier asking for 5 beers. So, right? Someday that's going to get a laugh. Anyhow, so...
Got one.
2, 3, 4. So each of the letters have a numerical value. So in our language, in English, A would be 1, B would be 2, C would be 3, and so on. Yud has the numerical value of 10. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yud. Okay? Hey has the numerical value of 5. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. And Vav has the numerical value of 6. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav. And then Hey, 5 again. So the numerical value of God's name is 26. Everyone with me so far? Have I lost anyone? Okay, I will, don't worry. What can we learn from that? Well, The word for love in Hebrew is ahava, which has the numerical value of 13. And so our sages teach us that when you experience your love for God and you experience God's love for you, now you have a deeper understanding of what is God's name. Because 13 plus 13 equals 26. Everyone with me on that? Yes? No? Okay. Now let's take a look at a different letter. This letter Aleph. This is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It is the only letter in Hebrew that is silent. In modern Hebrew, we do not pronounce Ayin. But in ancient Hebrew, Ayin was pronounced, so it was Ayin. So you wouldn't say Shema, you would say Shema. Okay? You can see why we make it silent now. Aleph is the only silent letter in the Hebrew alphabet. And it has the numerical value as the first letter of 1. But it has another meaning. Because if we look at this Aleph down here, we can see it's really composed of a... This is Vav, right? And this is Yud? So it's really composed of a Vav and 2 Yuds.
Oh, wait a minute. Okay, cool.
A Vav and 2 Yuds. Following that? Since it's a Vav and 2 Yuds, it has a numerical meaning not just of 1, but Yud is 10, and Vav is 6 of 26. What does that tell us? We really start to understand God's name in true silence. Meditation. By the way, the first words God speaks in the Torah to Abraham, he's still Avram at that point. The very first words he speaks to the first Jew is go meditate. It's literally what he says. Lech lecha, go into yourself, with yourself, for yourself, by yourself, away from the place that you know to a place I will show you. It is a lesson of meditation. So we find God in silence, which is kind of ironic given how much Jews talk. Yeah.
I've heard before too that one way you could pronounce the name of God, using only the soft sounds that we know, sounds very much like an inhalation and exhalation of breath.
So there is something called the 21st Yichud. When we get into Kabbalah, when we get into meditation, there's an advanced meditative technique involving using the 10 vowel systems with the letters in order to achieve a heightened state of awareness to literally change your neurochemistry. And it does. It actually takes you out of the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems by doing this chanting, and so that you release fight or flight. And when you do it, they've done studies on it. Guys named Tequila and Newberg did it with Buddhist priests, but other people have done it with this same type of chanting. It actually, hippocampus. It makes the hippocampus 400% more active. Didn't you like your rabbi knew that? Right. So it actually makes a difference. So yes, but that's again a meditation that's a personal meditation, not as we're davening as well. Okay? All right, so let's just take a look and see about some Torah stuff. Okay? So what I'm going to do, first of all, let me go one more place. It says in the Torah that we are made in the image of God. You guys have heard that before, right? Does that mean God has gray hair or a large nose? Does God look like me now or when I was in shape in 25? Okay? The answer is neither. If you take this 4-lettered name of God and you go, instead of horizontally, vertically, you'll find the image in your hand that it looks like that. And that looks like a human being, doesn't it? Okay? It is the vertical name of God, and there's the head and neck, the shoulders, the torso, and the hips and legs. That's so we all do have God's name in this. All right. I want to do a little study so we start to understand how we study. So I'm just going to pass out some books to people. You guys can go that way. If you have a Tanakh, you guys can share one as well. If they want to read guys different translations. We're going to go to Genesis 1, Bereshit 1. 1:1, the creation.
How do they? So obviously, in a system as complex as Judaism, you could find a lot of these insights. Many have been found. How do the rabbis, let's say, negotiate over which ones they find to be compelling versus not compelling?
Well, this is great saying, Elu ve'elu. These words and these words are both words of Torah. But when they're looking at something, and take that question even farther, how do they make a judgment? Okay. Is they will look intratextually. And they'll say, if this is true here, then it is true here. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. And so they'll look intratextually. It is through that process that a man named Rabbi Isaac of Accra, Rabbi Isaac the Blind, you can Wikipedia him, I believe he's 10th century. He calculated the age of the universe based upon Bible. JPL did the same thing in the 70s, and I think they're like 1.5% different, which out of billions of years is
Pretty close.
within a margin of error on one side or the other. Right? He did it from text, looking at 1,000 years is but a day in your eye, all this different kind of stuff. So they dialogue about it. And the idea, since God is infinite, you can't say this is the way. See, Judaism is really tough. It's tough to be a Jew because we don't provide answers. We provide questions. And the idea is that the more we question, the more we have dialogue. The more dialogue we have, the more we can start to understand what is infinite, bigger than us. As opposed to, there are certain other religions where they say, this is the answer. So do this, and you get this result. This is the answer. You will go to heaven, except whatever it may be. That's not us. Ours is wrestling. Ours is, Yisrael literally means he who wrestles with God. That's what the word actually means. And so we're always trying to delve deeper. We're trying to uncover and open up the different things. And it's so important to have that dialogue. That's why you study in groups. You study as chavruta, as friends. You study and learn together because everyone has insights. And one person's insight is no better than another's. The only difference is one based on previous precedents, on previous interpretations, and one was pulled out of someone's tochas. Okay? But there are understandings, and we start to get it. So I'll explain to you the way that my book came about is it says in the Talmud that there is a theme that ties all of the books of the Ketuvim section of the Bible together, but it doesn't say what it is. In teaching at Loyola Marymount, I found a theme, a pattern. So I started teaching it that way to see if I was right, if this was really, and I'm not saying this is what they're referring to in the Talmud, but if this pattern was accurate. And it got to the point where I could tell students, I could show them a passage from that they'd never read, and they could tell me which book it came from. So then I talked to some other scholars and rabbis, both Catholic and rabbis and academic scholars. I said, what do you think of this? And they said, you should write a book on this because this works. That's how it came about. So that's how you wrestle with stuff. You explore. It's just like any scientific method. So let's take a look at the very, very beginning. Okay? And let's go, if you're online, if you have a Bible, and you can go to Genesis 1:1. We have different translations, but if we go to the very first words in the very first book of Bereshit, would someone please read whatever your translation is for the verses 1:1 through 1:5? Someone, anyone, just read loudly.
In the beginning of God's creating the heavens and the earth, when the earth was astonishingly empty, with darkness upon the surface of the deep, and the divine presence hovered upon the surface of the waters, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated between the light and the darkness. God called to the light day, and to the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, one day.
Okay. We've heard that story before, right? Let's look at it from a couple of different ways. Because that doesn't sound like the Big Bang Theory we all learned in school, right? And yet we know the Big Bang Theory. That one, Doctor, I don't remember if that edition actually is left to right or right to left. It might be left to right, yeah. It's a form translation. So I actually don't know. So let's look at this differently. I'm going to translate. First of all, I don't like translations. Okay? Translation is by definition interpretation. And yet I respect all translations because it is really, really difficult to translate. And that's why we need to study. Because there's so much lost in any translation. Who speaks a foreign language? Okay, what do you speak? Russian. Хорошо. What do you speak? Sign language. French. Okay? So, aren't you glad I knew хорошо? And it's Dobrovicha right now, right? We're in Dobrovicha? It's Vicha right now. Veche? That, пожалуйста, спасибо, Utra,
Nazdarovia.
and Druk, and a couple of the words I cannot say because there might be women around. So that's very good. So language it's really hard to translate certain words, isn't it? You got to really understand them, and then when you get it. So I'm going to translate this as we read it from the Hebrew, okay? Directly from the Hebrew. Bereshit. Now understand this first word, Bereshit, which we're going to study in a few minutes. This word doesn't exist in Hebrew. It's wrong conjugation. Okay? The word only exists here, doesn't exist anywhere else, and so it doesn't exist. Now, what Rosh means, the head or the intellect. So we often say Bereshit means in the beginning, because Be means in, when it began. Okay? But it's more than that, as we're going to study that first word. Bereshit bara Elohim. In the beginning, when it began, before it all began, Elohim, bara Elohim, God created et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, the heavens and the earth. Now, the word for fire in Hebrew is esh. The word for water is mayim. Can you hear both of them in shemayim? You hear the esh mayim? Okay? So the heavens are actually composed, as is defined here, as water and fire or gas. Right? With me? Ve'et haaretz, and the solidity, the land. V'haaretz, and the substance, hayta tohu v'vohu, it was chaos and confusion. V'choshek al pnei tachom, and there was this depth of darkness on the face of these depths. V'ruach Elohim, and the Spirit of God, merachefet. Merachefet is used in slang in modern Israel, but it means to move very, very quickly to create a spark. It's actually one of the terms used for some intimate relations, actually. But it's to create a spark. So the Spirit of God, merachefet, moved very quickly to create a spark, al pnei hamayim, on the face of the waters. V'yomer Elohim, and the God said, Yihior, there will be light, v'hior, and there was light. V'yira Elohim et ha'or, and God perceived the light, ki tov. Does anyone remember what ki means? It means because. God perceived the light because it was good. V'yavdel Elohim bein ha'or uvein ha'choshech, and God separated bein ha'or, between the light, uvein ha'choshech, and between the darkness. First thing God does in the physical world is separation. V'yikra Elohim, and God called La'or, and God called to the light, Yom, day. L'choshech kara laila, and to the darkness he called night. Literally, it's la in front of a word means to. So when it says La'or, it means to the light. L'choshech, it means to the dark. He called light, called night. Vayerev, and there was evening. Vayevoker, and there was morning. Yom echad, day one. So, according to the Torah, if we really see what it says, when this whole thing began, the God created, this God created Shemayim v'aretz, so gas, liquid, and substance. And it was chaos and confusion. And the Spirit of God moved very quickly on it. And God perceived that there was light. He separated between the light and the darkness. Now, I'm no scientist, but doesn't that sound like the Big Bang?
Yes, that does.
So is the Big Bang in opposition to what Torah says? It's not, is it? It's just how you read it. Just understanding the Hebrew. Any questions on that so far? Was that new for you? Yes, go ahead, Linda.
So, first was the darkness, then was the light. Is
That's-
that why?
What does it say? Do you have a Bible in front of you?
No,
Okay. Well.
I'm just watching you.
That's
but-
okay.
So then that's why, is that why the Jewish day begins?
Oh, you mean at the end? Yes. Vayera vayivoker. Yes. There was. So there's. We call it out as there's evening and there was morning, and as a result, our 24-hour cycle begins at sunset. Which says a tremendous amount about who we are as Jews. We're not scared of the dark. We dream in the dark. There's a lot we'll study later on about Talmudic interpretations of dreams and how important that is. And in fact, there's whole sections upon dream interpretation of the Talmud. And we're not scared of nighttime. We have faith there will be morning. But our cycle begins evening to evening. Okay? And so a holiday, just to make sure, ends up being 25 hours because you have sunset and then it ends when there are 3 stars in the sky, or when the rabbi says there's 3 stars in the sky. Okay, because there's always 3 stars in the sky, right? Whether you can see them or they're cloudy or not, there's always 3. Okay.
Can you give that description again? You said he moved quickly.
I move quickly.
No, the God moved quickly.
God merachefet, to move quickly and create a spark. Okay? That is often not, is used sometimes in Israel for something else. Bada bing, bada boom. Okay, so now let's take a word. So does that kind of put a different framework on this first words of Torah? It's a different understanding, isn't it? Now, let's take a look at this word, Bereshit. If you have a pen, they'll keep falling, aren't they? If you have a pen, now would be a good time to pull it out and turn to the page right here that says Bereshit. Okay? Does anyone need pens? I've got plenty of pens. Do you guys want pens?
Says what?
Okay. Hold on 1 second. Please pause. Talk amongst yourselves.
Oh wait, I lied.
Maybe.
Yeah, I did. I found one.
Just for the record, I am not sick. I'm coughing. The cough is from a medical procedure. So I don't want to make you nervous. No, it's not allergy. They had 2 for me. It's not.
Look at this. Sanitary pencils. Only been used once for keeping score in golf.
The hole-in-one.
Thank you.
That's right. For anyone who doesn't know, one of my sons got a hole in one last time.
First time?
He's 11.
Hey, you know?
Tiger Woods started young.
That's
start
what I
that
was
young.
thinking. Thank you.
Yes, you got his first hole in one. Okay, so this is a good time to pull it out. So this word, Bereshit, you see it right here. And in case you don't know the names of the letters, I've printed them on top so you can see. It says Bet above Bet, it says Resh above Resh, it says Aleph above Aleph, it says Shin above Shin, it says Yod above Yod, it says Taf above Taf. Everyone good? Okay. This word does not exist in Hebrew. This is the first thing to understand. If it does not exist, if it is improper grammar, one of 2 things is a truth. Either God doesn't know how to write or speak, or there's a hidden meaning. Our sages typically go with the second. Now, if you took these letters and you rearranged them like anagrams, it would spell the phrase Shirat Av, which means the song of the Father. God creates with music. Creates with music. But let's look about something. Someone once called the Torah the world's longest mantra. It takes a year to recite it, and then we start it all over again. Okay? The last word in the Torah is Yisrael. Israel. The last letter being a lamed. That letter right there. Okay? Which means that as what we'll do on Simchas Torah this weekend, B'ezrat Hashem, when we're going to read the last word, Yisrael, and then we're going to rewrap the whole Torah to the beginning and start with Bereshit again. Well, interestingly, lamed and vet or bet spell a word. They spell the word lev, which means heart. And so we hear often that the heart connects the Torah and the Torah connects our hearts. Now, the rabbis ask, why is it that God created the Torah and the first letter is the second letter of the alphabet? Why is it the second letter of the alphabet? Why didn't God create the Torah with the word that began with the first letter of the alphabet? And like rabbis will constantly do, they discuss and then answer their own questions. So I want you to imagine that there actually is an aleph hidden right there. So that there's a lamed and a vet and a little hidden aleph. Or another way of phrasing it is a silent space in the middle of the heart. Okay? Everyone follow how I got there? Aleph is silent. It's between the 2 letters that spell heart. So think of it as a silent space in the middle of a heart. Everyone with me? Yes? You got to at least nod. Or they can give me thumbs up there too. Or thumbs down. I don't know. Whatever they want. Now let's look at this word that really doesn't make sense at all. And I'll probably have to do this more than once or thrice. If you take the first letter of this word, bet, you take the second to last letter, yud, you take the last, which is tov, which is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, it spells the word bet or bayit, which means a home or a container, because that's what a home is. Okay? That's why I have this, you'll see right there, this black line going from the tov and the yud. Then I got a green line. If you take the first and second and third letters, bet, resh, and aleph, it spells the word bara, which means create. If you take the second, third, and fourth letters, it spells the word rosh, which means head or intellect. If you take the third and fourth, it spells the word eish, which means fire or passion. If you take the third, fourth, and fifth, it spells ishi, which means my human being. And the last letter tov always stands for Torah, which actually means guidelines. This is a roadmap to manifest anything you want in your life. Remember, we start by going in the silent place in our heart. So, how do we manifest something? We go into the silent place in our heart. We create the container upon which we will be manifesting. We create it with our intellect and our passion, that which we create, and we give it guidelines to work through. So, I have in the silent part of my heart the desire to write a piece of music. I create a container. It's going to be a string quartet. I create it with both my mind and my passion, and I give it guidelines to exist by. It's going to be 3/4 rhythm. It's going to be played softly, loudly, whatever else it may be. It doesn't matter what it is. That is how we create, isn't it? And it's all right there in this word, reshi. Who did I lose? Nobody?
You lost me.
Thank you.
My
Thank
human
God.
being, the red, my human being.
Okay.
In the creative process.
Aleph, Shin, and Yud. Ish means man. Isha means woman. Ishi means my human being. Okay? All of it's right there hidden. So again, we go to the silent place, because the last word is Israel. We go to the silent place in the middle of our heart. We bara, we create with our rosh and our eish what we're creating, and we give it guidelines to exist by. Isn't that how you create anything in your life? Pick what it is in your life. Now, why is it... Everyone with me now? Did I lose anyone else? We good? I don't have to say it through, right? I'm used to saying this 3-4 times. Okay. Maybe it helped because I already had it drawn out. So, why is it important to know how God created the universe? Why not just start with, since the Bible is effectively a history of the Hebrews, of the Jewish people, why not just start with either Adam or even Abraham? It's a very, very specific reason. Let's say that I made a piece of art. Trust me, you would not want me to make a piece of art, but let's say that I did. Okay? Or I wrote a piece of music. Let's say I made a piece of art. I made a beautiful painting. And I came and I said, Carolyn, here, this is yours. Stephen, do I have the right to do that? Can I give her my painting? How come?
You give a gift.
And I created it, right? So I get to give it to you.
Yeah.
So when God says that this is the land for the Hebrews, this is the land I've promised your ancestors, and this is the land for you, since God, as we know from Torah, we've just read this, created everything,
It's his to give.
it's his to give. And by the way, I say his only because I'm too lazy to say he, she, it, they. Okay? I do want to show you something else as long as I thought that just now. When we look at God's sacred name, in Hebrew, and I think in other languages as well, there's what we call a shoresh, the root of a word. I think that's true with French. Is that true with Russian? You can conjugate the word future tense, past tense, masculine, feminine, plural, etc., right? Good one. Okay. Same in Hebrew. If we look at this word of God's name, and we don't look at it as a God's name or pronoun or proper noun, we look at it as just as a piece of grammar, we would say that the shoresh, the root of this word, are these two letters of hey and vav. Okay? They spell the verb lihyot which means to be. With me? When you put a yud in front of a word, remember going this way, right to left, yud means future tense masculine. So if I want to say he will speak, instead of saying medaber, I say yedaber. Okay? If you put a hey at the end of a word, it means past tense feminine. So yedaber means he will speak. Debra means she did speak. Okay? This means that our word for God is to be, or to exist, in both, which is now, in both future and past, feminine and masculine. In other words, the Yud He Vav He is the simultaneous conjugation of masculine and feminine, past, present, and future. This is the name of God. It's pretty cool, isn't it? Right? That's a pretty cool one. So this is all right there in plain sight. We just have to study. So everyone's got this Bereshit idea, right? Now, what ends up happening is that God creates the 6 days, and we know on the 7th day God rests. There are 2 creation stories in it, and God rests, and it says actually God got a soul, because it takes the word vayi nafash, Yom hashvi'i shavat ve'nafash, and on the 7th day God rested vayi nafash. Nefesh means soul. It takes the noun of nefesh and puts it into a verb, past tense. And so the 7th day God needs us as well. But in this process, God creates the human being. Okay? Someone tell me the story of Adam and Eve and how they're created. Come on, you all know the story. We've all heard it. If not, you can watch the TV series Lucifer. Come on. Okay, who's watched it? Come on. It's a guilty pleasure. Who's watched it? I had to watch it because I had to watch things because I think they should be watched by a rabbi. It actually was fun. I have to admit it. Okay. Let's turn to chapter 1, verse 26. This is where God is making human beings. And God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. They shall rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, over the animal, the whole earth, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created the man in his image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. This is very confusing grammar. It's going back and forth between male and female, and back and forth between singular and plural. Okay? Now, if we remember the story, who can tell me the story of Adam? How did Eve come about?
Eve came about when Adam was sleeping.
Eve came about. Okay, tell the story. Come on, loudly.
Okay, so Eve came about after the one in the beginning was created and disappeared, but that's another sidetrack story. Eve came about when Adam was sleeping. God took, he was sad and he was lonely, he wanted a companion, so God took a rib from him and created his partner, his female counterpart from his rib.
Okay, so how many of us have heard God created Eve out of Adam's rib? Yes?
Yeah.
And as a result, women are supposed to be subservient to men. Who's ever heard that one?
Of course, in a Renaissance fair, we'll say that Adam was born with 3 boobs, and that's where they don't need 3.
Okay, so we find it in chapter 2, verse 20, and man did not find a helper to or something. So Hashem God cast a deep sleep upon the man, and he slept. And he took one of his sides, and he filled in flesh in its place. Then Hashem God fashioned the side that he had taken from the man into a woman, and he brought her to the man. Okay? Except that's not what it says. In Hebrew, the prefix ha means the. So the word for table is shulchan. If I want to say the table, I would say ha shulchan. The word for book is sefer. If I want to say the sefer, the book, I'd say ha sefer. Everyone with me? There is this creature that God creates. Remember, it says God creates them. And this creature is called Ha-Adam, the human being. And then after Ha-Adam is split, it no longer is called Ha-Adam. He's now called Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve. May I borrow the 2 of you because I know you live together, so I'm not worried about anyone getting too close.
Yeah.
Well, it's okay if you get close, right? Put down your books, I need you to come up here. Okay? So behold, now turn back to back. Okay? Behold, ha'adam. This is the human being. Now let's look back at this line that was so confusing. Oh, there go all my pencils. Let's go. Oh, there's my board. Everything's falling apart. So let's read this line again. Let us make man in our image. Why our? It's male and female, and we know God is both male and female, right?
So God is talking to God's self.
God, this is God saying to God's self and to human beings and to Torah and to the angels as well.
Why is there a plural we?
Why is there we? It's both. There's a couple of interpretations. One is because God refers to the royal we. One is because he's also speaking to the angels, who don't like making man, by the way. The angels do not want man to be made because we have free will, and that's going to muck things up. It's just going to mess them all up.
That's right.
Yeah.
This, I don't know if this relates. Why does God say, let us, and not let me? Or
Elohim. Again, our image. And that's what I was saying. There's a couple of interpretations. One is that he's speaking with the angels, that he's doing it. One is because he is plural, because as we know, he's both male and female.
But he's saying,
Us.
we create.
We create. It's Elohim.
Would
Let's
that
go.
be like the royal?
One could be this is the ultimate will. Okay?
Yeah.
So let us make the man in our image, in our likeness. They shall rule over the flesh of the sea, etc. So God created the human being in his image, in the image of God. He created male and female, he created them. This is both a plural and an individual object. Does everyone see that? Yes? Now, where are they connected if they're back to back? No, the rib. Right? I'm no doctor, but isn't there a rib back here?
Those ribs.
Some doctor. Is there a rib back here?
Fabulous, really.
Now, what does God do? God casts asleep over Ha'adam. Sleep. Sleep. God separates Ha'adam. And now you have, from then on, Adam and Eve. Everyone follow that? So was Eve created from man's rib? Should women be subservient to men as a result? No. Just because they want to be, right, Al? No. You notice I stepped far out of her reach when I said that.
I have to agree to that. I agree to that.
Right? No, but right? So there's no logic, and that's been used for centuries, that women should be subservient to men because Adam was created first. But the reality is, in the Hebrew, that's not what happens. There's this being that's created, male and female. They had both.
Is Chava coming from the Adam, Chava?
No, it's a different letter. It's a different letter. Chava means the birth mother of the world. So, now you have Adam and Eve. That put a little bit different story on this idea of creation. Now let's keep thinking like rabbis. I'm sure I'm good time-wise, and I think I am.
Would they have been thinking of Siamese twins?
God created a Siamese twin, male and female, before they started. Yes, that's exactly. Only connected at the back. Yeah, and God separates them. So that's basically the image, right? Now let's take a look at something else. Somebody tell me the story of the evil serpent. Ooh. What happened to the serpent? Come on, you guys know the story.
Fallen angel.
What's the story of the Bible, right? So there's a snake, and what does the snake do?
Tempts Eve.
It tempts Eve. What does the snake tell Eve to do?
Eat from the one tree.
It's the one tree you can't eat. And so she eats. And what then happens? Eve is then, it realizes she's naked. And so what does she do? What does she do to Adam?
Convinces him.
She convinces him to eat. This is what we all grew up on, right? Isn't this the story most of us heard? And then God says, excuse me, who told you were naked? And because of this, they're thrown out of Eden, and Eve is going to have pain in childbirth, and the snake, who up to that point is walking on 2 feet, is going to crawl forever. Sound familiar?
Yes.
Except that's not what the text says. It's not my fault that people come up with these things, and it's not what the text says. So let's look at what the seed says. First of all, God says to man, in chapter 2, verse 16, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge of good and bad you must not eat thereof, for on the day you eat of it you shall surely die. Well, I got a question. No, that's not even my question. My question is, how does Adam even know what dying means?
Good point.
Okay. I didn't see a definition earlier, but let's move on anyhow. Okay? Now he says that before there's the split, and then there's split. I'm sorry, that's after the split, and the split happens, and they were naked and they were not ashamed. Now the serpent, this is chapter 3, was cunning beyond any beast of the field that God had made. He said to the woman, "Did perhaps God say you shall not eat of any tree of the woman?" And the woman said to the serpent, "Of the fruit of the tree of garden we may eat. Of the fruit of the tree which is in the center of the garden, God has said, you shall neither eat it nor touch it, lest you die." What's the problem? Think. I want you to start thinking like rabbis. That's what this class is ultimately all about, to start thinking Jewishly. What is the problem with the sentence? What did God say to Adam? Do not eat it. What does Adam say to Eve? No, someone read it. Come on, don't just go ahead and read it.
I couldn't find
Chapter Genesis chapter 3, verse 3. What does it say? Think. Someone read out loud. Chapter 3, verse 3.
Yeah, it was only about fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden that God said, you shall not eat of it or touch it lest you die.
So what's the problem? The serpent, God says to Adam, hey, don't eat it or you're going to die. Serpent says to, Eve
Don't
says to
eat
the
it
serpent,
or touch it.
where'd she get touch it from?
What?
Where'd she get touch it from?
Yeah, I didn't say anything. I said, yeah.
So who told her you can't touch it? God didn't tell her that, so who told her? There's only one other person, Adam. Right? He's trying to protect her. He's being overly protective. So you know what? Look, honey,
Be careful, that's it.
you can't eat it or touch it. I want to keep you far away. That poses a problem, doesn't it? And so the Midrash, which are oral stories that are written down 1,000, 2,000 years ago, but both Midrash and I think Talmud as well, the story is that the serpent says, oh, you can't eat it, you can't touch it. Okay? And the serpent said to the woman, you will surely not die, for God knows that on the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, you will be like God, knowing good and bad. And it says, and the woman perceived that the tree was good for eating, and that it was a delight to the eyes. How did she learn this? So the Midrash says, the serpent's talking to Eve, and she says, you can't touch it or eat it. He says, oh, because you'll die, right? She goes, yes. So he pushes her. And she falls into the tree. And guess what happens? She doesn't die. She doesn't die. Well, if you didn't die when you ate it, or when you touched it, you might as well eat it. So whose fault is it that she ate it? Is it the serpent's? He's part and parcel of it. But it's also Adam's, isn't it?
This suggests that Adam doesn't trust her to begin with, which is quite a strange suggestion considering they haven't eaten yet.
He has issues about trying to keep her safe, trying to build a fence, trying to make it extra safe. So just to make sure you don't even touch it.
But they don't even know good and evil yet, so how does it, like... the whole
He's
thing-
just trying to extend. But it's partially his fault, isn't it? Right? Now, here comes what gets even better.
What, because he added the don't touch it?
Right.
He had to be the one who added don't touch it. Who else? There's no one else around to say it.
Unless she interpreted it as
No,
stay away
whatever it
from
may be, it's been made clear that she thinks you can't touch it either. So when she finds she can touch it, she eats it. Now she's got a problem. Because now her eyes have been opened. And it's desirable, and so she ate it. And so she gave it to her husband, and he ate it. And the beginner of the Midrash says that he knew it was wrong, but for what's called shalom bayit, peace in the house, he ate it. Because that trumps other things. Okay? We all do things for our spouses or our children that maybe we don't think are the wisest or best choices, and we do it for peace in the house. It's just not worth it. Right?
Are you going past this now? Because I just have to say, I have heard this story a million times, and I still don't get it. I can't relate it to, why did God tell them not to eat, and why is this the tree of knowledge, and what is wrong with knowledge?
Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let's keep going with it. Okay? Let's just keep going.
I mean, I just don't see,
Let's keep going and see if we get to it. Let's finish this part of the story
Okay.
and see where we get to. Okay? All right. So God comes and says, Ayacha, where are you? And he said, Adam says, I heard the sound of you in the garden. I was afraid because I was naked, and so I hid. And God said, wait a minute. Who told you you were naked? Have you eaten of the fruit which I commanded you not to eat? Now, I got a question. If God is all-knowing,
How did he know?
doesn't God know this?
Yeah, but he wants to
The apple.
Say loudly. He wants what?
He wants to know if Adam's going to be truthful.
He wants to know about developing the relationship. You walk into the kitchen, and in the kitchen, the cookie jar is on the ground. It's broken. There's cookies on the floor, and your kid has chocolate chips on his mouth. And you say, who had a cookie? Who broke the cookie jar? Are you saying it because you don't know? No, you're saying because you want to deepen the relationship. Have it built on honesty. So he says, who told you that you were naked? What happened? Now, what should Adam have said? He should have said, I ate the apple. I ate the fruit. By the way, it was not an apple. It was probably either a pomegranate or a fig. And by pomegranate, by the way, pomegranates have 613 seeds, one for each commandment. That is the story.
That's lore.
I have tried counting them twice. And once was like in the 590s and once was in the 620s. So it was close enough. It was close enough that you got to kind of look and say these could be genetically modified or something. Close enough. And I could have been wrong in
You
counting.
can miscount
I had
it
an
after
entire
that
class
long.
count pomegranate seeds one day.
And what did they come up with?
They were all right around there. They
Yeah.
were between 5 and 6.
Yeah, it's pretty close. All right. So he should have said, God, I messed up, I did it. Instead, what does he say? We look in chapter 3, verse 12. The man said, God, the woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree and I ate. Her fault.
Of course. Well, we do that today too.
So Adam's now failed this test. So God's going to go to the woman. God said to the woman, what is this that you have done? And what does she say?
The serpent made me do it.
The serpent deceived me and I ate. She didn't take any responsibility either. And God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you, etc., etc. So, how many of you are parents? How many of you have been children?
I skipped that stage. It was not, you know.
I was born with a gray beard.
Right, that's right.
So, often, not often, but at times, we test our children. We give them enough, so to speak, rope to get in danger, right? We give them enough things to see how they're going to do. We want to see if they're going to step up. Isn't that what we do as parents sometimes? So God's done this now to Adam and Eve. And what they do? They messed up. But what was the bigger mess up?
Lie. Tried to hide it.
They tried to hide it. They didn't take responsibility for themselves. Okay? They didn't take responsibility for themselves. And so they're going to have to leave. They're going to have to go. But so on a certain level,
Now they're gonna have to fend for
let's see who really is to blame. Is the serpent to blame? Yes. He did things that weren't right. And we say that he did it because of jealousy of the intimate relationships between Adam and Eve. The intimacy between them. Is Eve to blame? Absolutely. She did eat it. Is Adam to blame? Absolutely. Is God to blame? Absolutely. It's not just one. It's not so black and white. When we start looking at the text, what are we learning? We're learning that it's really not so clear that this is the way, is it? Because that's not how life is. Life is messy. I mean, any of you ever found life to not be messy? It's kind of the joy of it. Okay?
Well, sometimes.
But if there's all stuff, right? It's not this plan. Okay, go on, Linda.
So when God told them not to, he knew they were going to. So that's
Well,
like
if God exists outside of time as all-knowing, all-powerful, and all good, one could say that he knew they were going to, even though they had free will.
So then he's responsible because
He has a
created
responsibility,
it.
but also because he set up a situation that was not a winning situation.
He made the snake.
You know?
People.
Toast the cookies.
Linda, what's your favorite food? What's your favorite food?
First thing that came to mind was pomegranate.
Pomegranate. What's your favorite dessert that you should? What's the favorite food you have that you should never eat? Cake. What kind of cake?
Vanilla chocolate frosting.
Vanilla chocolate. Do you like the little custard in between too? No, you just like straight plain vanilla with chocolate. You know, it's so funny because we have cake of that in the house. You may all have a piece, except you, with vanilla and chocolate frosting. And it has been certified that it has a cure, so you don't have to worry about any viruses. Okay?
Then
Everyone can, but you, Linda.
Okay.
How much do you want now? Maybe a little bit more?
Maybe I want to see it.
Don't try to-
Don't call me on my bluff.
But you can't see it, taste it, or touch it.
Right? So, do you guys see the point? So, it doesn't have to be phrased this way. And we do need to come out of Eden. You know, it's interesting. We're taught that every human soul was at the time when the apple was eaten, when the fruit was eaten, except for one. One soul was so holy, it flew away. It would not be anywhere in the area at the time when that that mistake happened. It's the soul of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of modern Hasidism.
Well, that's a Hasidic story. Definitely.
It's a great story. All right, so
So
point is,
basically, God wanted it to happen. It's set up.
it's kind of an interpretation. Now you can interpret it. Now let's look at how we can interpret this. Okay. God wanted it to happen. He wanted them out of Eden. He wanted them to fend for themselves, and this was all an excuse and a drama and a play to get them out. The serpent is the definition of evil. He's a fallen angel. He's a whatever, and he's the definition of evil, and so he wanted to get them out. Eve has no boundaries and has no idea of how to, what she should or should not do. She does. She just follows her appetites, and and so that's why we were out.
Like a young child.
Adam is just a shmendrik who not only eats when he's the one who was told, he then denies responsibility. Which is true? All of them. All of them. That is one of the understandings when you start understanding Judaism. Because they're all based in text, aren't they?
Except that God creates everything. Does Judaism believe in free will?
Absolutely.
Okay. But there's a tricky moment with free will. If God is all knowing and all creating, then like
This is the great theological argument or question. How can God be all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good, and all-powerful, the three O's in a B, omniscient, all-seeing, all-powerful, all-knowing, and good, and the Holocaust happened? Okay? And the answer is man has free will, and both are true. And it's the wrestling with those contradictory positions that allow us to start to open up ourselves to a deeper level of awareness. Because both are true. Holocaust happens because man turns his back on God and on man. I mean, that's the ultimate question. How does this tragedy, pick the tragedy, God forbid, happen? How does it happen if God's so good? And yet they do. And so it becomes, that's where faith gets into it. Because if we really knew, then it wouldn't require faith. And there would be no free will. It's an interesting statement, again, as a Hasidic statement, that if we really understood how much God loved us, no one would ever make a sin. If we really understood how much God loves us in every moment, always, especially when it seems like we're not loved.
But isn't this the beginning of Jewish guilt?
No, there is no Jewish guilt. It's Catholic guilt. We adopted it from them.
That's what you say, but how about this story?
There's no guilt involved. Adam doesn't say, "Oh, I'm so bad. I'm so horrible."
Yeah, they're not. They don't do it.
He just is like a child. He denies it, and then he goes makes his way. He don't feel guilty about it. Where does he say it? Where does he say that? Oh God, I'm so sorry. I made such a big mistake. I shouldn't have listened to anybody. I knew it was right, and I feel horrible about it. He doesn't say anything like that. He just says she made me do it. He acts like a child. Wait. Come on.
But he's cursing her for what she did.
Adam doesn't curse her.
Just tries to blame her.
Adam doesn't curse her. God curses her.
Yeah,
God says you're going to have pain in
Yeah,
childbirth.
God does. Yeah.
So Torah is written in the language of men. And I think everyone could agree. I'm not a woman. But I think how many of you were mothers? Gave birth? Are we too loud?
No,
okay.
I wanted to pop in and listen. It
Um,
sounded interesting.
So we're just talking about that women were not created for man. You do not need to be subservient to your husband.
I could hear a little bit from over there, and I was like, oh, they're talking about Genesis. I want to
Yeah. So if we take a look at it, right? If we go back and look, God is the one who curses women. Now I'm not a mother, but you know what? My understanding is it's kind of like passing a watermelon through the eye of a needle, right? Is that okay? So this allows someone to say that's why. But for other people, it can be, I understand, it can be a joyous experience. Although I will tell you, there is a chemical, some sort of chemical that's released after a woman gives birth, so she doesn't remember the pain. And there's other things she forgets. If you ask Allison, she will tell you the 10 weeks she was on bed rest, I did nothing but feed her waffles and pancakes. And I'm telling you point blank, that's not true. She had 5 meals a day of different things. She will say she gained 100 pounds because I fed her all. So the point is, it's not, Adam doesn't ever feel guilt. He doesn't ever say, oh, I made a mistake. He blames her. And then she blames the serpent. It's the whole thing is this drama of a setup.
The serpent didn't respond.
Make sense? So it's a different way of looking at it. Other questions on this? Yeah. Oh, wait, Lydia had one. Go ahead.
I'll get off of this completely after this one more question. Why is it called the tree of knowledge?
Because it is a knowledge of that which is right and wrong. It is a tree of knowledge.
Which dovetailed really nicely. A little bit less of a question, but one could look at this whole story of Breshit as a child developmental kind of stage.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That,
it's not one could, one should.
Innocence.
It's not just the one could. One should.
Yeah. So Adam and Eve, while they're in the Garden of Eden, everything is provided for them. Just like a young child, everything is provided by mom and dad. They have no wants,
But they're not.
no needs.
But they're not responsible. And they have no pleasures as a result.
And they have no understanding of separation, really, between.
No, they do understand separation between
a
the
little
sexes.
bit, but it's
they don't-
different than we as adults do.
But
and
they
it's
don't.
when they have knowledge. It's when they take in knowledge that they learn from the adults around.
Here's what we need to understand. They need to grow so they can have more free will, so they can experience the joys and the pains of free will, which allow us to experience the beauty of life. There is pain and there is suffering and there is evil. It exists. But from a larger picture, it also gives us the beauty of life. Right? There's a whole other level of experiencing life as we experience these different emotions. So, this is Adam and Eve. Any questions on Adam and Eve for a minute? We're going to move on a little bit. Because we're going to move on. So-and-so begat such and such begat so-and-so. Okay? But I'd like you, before all the begotten, if we turn to chapter, I always forget exactly which phrase, but chapter 4, I believe. And we can turn to chapter 4, verse number 6. This is a concept of, it says very specifically, as God is talking to Cain. If you improve yourself, you will be forgiven, but if you do not improve yourself, sin or evil rests at the door. Its desire is toward you, yet you can conquer it. This is the Jewish understanding of the nature of evil. Evil does not make you do anything. Who saw the movie Devil's Advocate? Okay. If you've not seen Devil's Advocate, I recommend it highly. You've seen it? Did you see it?
Yeah.
Oh, this is Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino. And Al Pacino plays a lawyer who's actually the devil. Okay? And it's a fabulous movie because there's a moment in it when Keanu Reeves, who's gone from being a nice lawyer to being not so nice, one after the other, one step after another step, he has gone down a progression and lost who he is. And he looks at Pacino and he says, "You made me do this." Pacino says, "I didn't make you do anything. You saw her and you wanted her. I didn't make you do anything. You saw an opportunity and you took it." This is the Jewish definition of evil. Because sin crouches at the doorway beckoning you to enter. It's like, come on, Al. Come on, no, you can say it. Come on. Right behind the store, I got this 22-year-old in a thong, and she likes older men. And Carolyn will never know. Now, if he, God forbid, went behind the store, first of all you'd find his dog poop, number one. But number two, did I make him? No. This is the Jewish definition of evil and the essence of free will. We can make for ourselves what is good or what is not good. It is our choice. And this is so, so important because what's going to happen over the next number of generations is 10 generations later, I'm going to stop with this guy as the last guy, I think. 10 generations later, we have this guy named Noah. Now, Noah literally means resting. Nach means to rest. It's an interesting comment. It says, this is chapter 6, verse 9. Noah was a righteous man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God. Later on, we're going to learn that Abraham walks before God. God says, walk before me and be perfect. But Noah walks with God. He is perfect in his generation. Now, his generation is a bunch of shmendricks, and they're all evil. So now the question is it tougher to be the best in a generation of evil or the best in a generation of good? It's an interesting question, isn't it? Right? If everyone is good around you, to be the best is hard because you're excelling even over the best. On the other hand, if everyone is bad around you, God, everyone is, does that mean you're so great? But he's perfect, he's righteous in his generation, he walks with God. So, I'm going to borrow you again, Alan. You can stand for a second. I seem to be using you a lot today. I'm teaching you for a minute. Walking with God. I'm going to let you be God if that's okay. And so we're walking together. If I have an issue, does it take faith? There's no faith there, is there? Because he's right next to me. Right? It's easy. If I got an issue, hey, God. He's right there, right? Conversely, later we're going to learn that Abraham, if you could stand back there for a second, God says, walk before me and be perfect. Now, it's an issue of faith, isn't it? I have to remember that God is there to catch me if I fall. Right? So I'm going to do something that's going to help me be mindful. To always remember that God is behind me. How am I going to do that? What do you think I'm going to do? Go ahead and sit down. Thank you. How am I going to do that? Oh, come on. What does every observant Jew? What do we do? All of us. We cover our heads. That's why wear a yarmulke. Right on the soft spot. We cover our heads. It's a reminder. When you teach a child to walk, you're teaching your little one, Catherine. She's how old?
A year and a half.
That's her right next to her. So when we come out for Sukkah, go to sleep, I say, guys, there's a baby asleep next to her.
She's on the other side of the house.
When you teach a child to walk, do you teach a child to walk this way? No. You come around and you have your fingers in front, right? This is how you teach a child to walk. And you're there in case the child falls. We have a yarmulke. We keep head covering. So to remind us that there's always God is there to catch us. That's why we wear the yarmulke. I mean, yeah, it's out of respect for this, but that's really why. Because we're told, Abraham is told to walk and before God and you shall be perfect. Okay? So Noah happens and we have the flood. I just want to look at the clock very quickly. The flood happens and people are saved, and ultimately Noah makes it a point to get 2 of every animal. The animals they came in by twosies, right? Roozies. I'm the only one who knows.
That ark that was built?
No, this is Roozies. Okay, so what happens? And by the way, he makes sure that he's got, just to make sure he's got every 2 of every kind, he makes sure to bring 1,000 houseflies, just to make sure, right? If you haven't read it, Letters from the Earth by Mark Twain. Has anyone read this? There's a fabulous book, Letters from the Earth by Mark Twain. It wasn't published until, I think, 50 years after he died. It is a brilliant biblical commentary. It is so brutal, bitter, sarcastic, and cynical. And it's Lucifer is writing letters to his friends. He takes a celestial day of 1,000 years on Earth, and he's writing letters to his buddies Michael and Gabriel. And he talks about this, and he talks about the different biblical stories. And it happens to be a brilliant, intellectually, it's a brilliant commentary. It's just brutal. It's brutal because he was such an atheist. But so Noah has we have this flood, and we have this peace that comes out as a result of it. There's 10 generations from Adam to Noah, and then 9 generations later, we get a man named Terach. Terach is an idol maker. And Terach, the Midrash teaches us that Terach is a big idol maker, and one day, one of his sons, Avram, says, Dad, you know this isn't right. So I'll stay out of this. I make idols, make a good living. And one day, Terach walks in, and there's a big idol, and it's got an axe in front of it, and that it's holding, and all of the other idols are broken. And Terach says, what did you do? And Avram says, it's not me, Dad. Someone brought an offering, and the big idol beat up everyone else and destroyed all the little idols. And Terach says, what are you talking about? You know these idols are just stone, they couldn't do that. And Avram says, that's right. Let your ears hear what your mouth says. Avram gets this. We're taught one of the things that inspire him is he says, the sun is the most powerful thing. The sun is God. And then the clouds come by. And he says, the clouds are more powerful than the sun. The clouds are God. And then a wind blows away the clouds. The wind is God. And the wind stops as the sun falls and it's nighttime. He says, nighttime is God. He says, the stars are coming up. The stars beat the nighttime. The stars are God. He sees the moon come up. It blots out the stars. He says the moon is God. The sun comes up, and he realizes everything is part of God. That is Jewish theology at its root, at its core. Because what happens is, actually, it's simply put, a great story. There's a 10-year-old, a Hasidic yeshiva, brilliant 10-year-old. He goes to college. And all the kids there in their 20s are so smart. They say, you're so smart. I'll give you $1 if you can tell me where God is. He says, I'll give you $10 if you can tell me where God isn't. God is everything and everywhere. And so 9 generations we have Terach, and then the 10th generation comes. And it's a man named Avram. And this will be the last teaching we'll give for this evening. Until next week. But let's turn to chapter 12. And God said to Avram, Lech lecha. We're going to come back to that. So let's translate this. And God said, the Yud He Vav He, this name we've already talked about, which is masculine, feminine, future, past, and present. This thing said to Avram, Lech lecha. Now, Lech is a verb. It is the command version of the verb lelechet. It means not just go, but go. It's a command. Lecha, depending on how it's used in a sentence, can mean in yourself, to yourself, for yourself, with yourself, by yourself. Okay, it can mean all those things. So, quintuple and entendre. And then he goes on. Martzacha, from your land, from all of your relatives, from the house of your father, to a place, a land that I will show to you. So what are the first words said to the first Jew by God? Go into yourself, go to yourself, go with yourself, go by yourself, go for yourself. Away from everything you know to a place I will show you. First words said to the first Jew, father of all 3 major religions. Because remember, he's going to have a son named Ishmael as well. Is go meditate. So that's what meditation is. It's going into, with, for, by yourself, away from what you know, to receive a place that is shown to you. So when we look at Judaism at its essence, it is actually a meditative and action-based, as we talked about. It's action, and that includes meditation. And that's what starts us on our journey into Judaism. So we're going to stop there. Any questions on this so far? I know we covered a lot of material tonight. Lots. Yes?
Avram is Abram?
Avram, his name is Avram. And then when he does the circumcision, he makes a covenant. Brit, which is a circumcision. We want to study that next week. And when that Brit happens, it's a covenant. He gives God his foreskin, so to speak, and God takes the He, the Ha sound, from the Yud He Vav He, the 4-letter name of God, and he takes that and he puts that name into Avram's name, so it's no longer Avram, it's now Avraham. Make sense? It's when we get into that next week. It changes Sarai to Sarah. Yeah. So, questions? All right, then we'll call it a night now. There's nothing tomorrow night. Wednesday night we have Talmud and tobacco. We're going to talk about the hidden secrets of Sukkot, including the beauty and magic and wonder about these 2 things, the lulav and the etrog. So beautiful. Okay? These 2 things. We're going to talk about how Sukkot is every holiday. I feel like I'm waving something at you. Every holiday in Judaism, every ritual, every practice, if you know how and you can track it back, you will find it stems from this holiday of Sukkot. Moreover, so we're going to learn about that. We're going to learn that Sukkot, how you can have how it can create health, prosperity, children, love, whatever it may be. That will be Wednesday evening. Thursday evening, we will be screening a really, really important movie. We cannot show it on Facebook. So for all of the people watching on Facebook Live, we can't do it because of copyright laws. It's a movie called From Swastikas to Jim Crow. It's a documentary that is very, very powerful. I showed it at Loyola a number of years ago, and I got a copy from the filmmaker. It is about German Jewish professors who got out before the war. They came to America. They could not get a job because no university would hire the Jew. And so they ended up getting work at the all-black schools like Morehouse. And so they're there getting jobs in the late 40s. And by the time the 60s roll around, they're tenured faculty. They are beloved professors. And they are part of the civil rights movement in a different way. I think it's an especially important film given what's going on in the world today between the black and Jewish communities. And to kind of look at a different solution. There is a photo in the film that it's still very striking to me. It's two photos next to each other, and one is Nazi brown shirts in stormtrooper boots with billy clubs and German shepherds beating on Jews. And next to it is a photo of Southern sheriffs in brown shirts in storm boots with batons and German shepherds beating up black guys. And I think it's especially important so that we remember there is more in common in our journey than there is apart. Sadly, that has been forgotten. As many of you know, BLM in its manifesto wants the destruction of Israel. And remember, there's a difference between the people who are protesting that don't even know the organization and the organization itself. But so I think this is a really important movie to kind of take a look at and kind of see what it means to look at things in a very different way, and that it doesn't have to be the way it is today, where we have BLM riots that are destroying Jewish homes in the Pico Robertson area, but rather there are other options. And this is it's really amazing because it's basically interviews, and with black kids talking about their mentor and their dissertation advisor, Professor so and so, who got out from Germany. And so we're doing that on Thursday, and then Friday was Shabbat and Shmini Atzeret and Simcha Torah, and then next Sunday, we will be taking down palm fronds from the Sukkah at 11 o'clock. And they're already, as you can see, drying out a lot. So thank you for doing this, and I hope this was good for everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, thank